Well, hello again, everyone. This is Kevin Gilmore, and I want to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon. At least it's afternoon where I am, titled Ministers' Benefits and the Path to Retire Well. I'm joined by several of my colleagues in the background, two of which are Roger Creedon and Emily Bartlett. Emily is going to be taking questions, seeing if you have questions. There's a Q&A feature in the Zoom software. If you will enter your questions in there, not the chat feature, but the Q&A feature. She's going to track those questions, she and Roger, and then if something is pertinent to where we are in the webinar, she will interrupt the session and ask the question or ask for the clarifying comment, and we'll handle that there. Otherwise, we'll handle questions at the end of the presentation. So please be writing down your questions and or putting them in that Q&A feature. I'm going to begin today by giving you a broad overview of our operation and our benefits, and then we're going to dig deeper into the new Ministers Match program for our 403B retirement savings plan. The chart that you're seeing on your screen, this pie chart, is a representation not about the dollars, but about the time that our team spends on a regular basis providing the benefits that we do to all of the ministers. You know, our mission is that we serve those who serve the Church of the Nazarene in the United States. And you'll notice that the right half of this pie chart relates to retirement plans, the 403B and the pension plans. The next two sections relate to insurance, and then there's a larger section on education, which includes things like this webinar, the compensation and tax memos we produce, and other things that we do, including traveling to conferences. And the small green shaded sliver at the top is benevolence. Benevolence is a small part of our time and a small part of our budget, but it's one of the most impactful things that we do as we get requests from districts across the U.S. for financial assistance to ministers in time of crisis. I'm going to assume that everyone on this webinar has at one point or another been employed in the secular world, the non-church world, and maybe even to the point where you were able to take part of the benefit plans by that single employer. And this chart shows the typical single employer is the sponsor of the benefit plans for their company. There's usually a human resources department that's all administrated through, and then employees participate in those plans through their back and forth in connection with the human resources department. I share this with you so you can have an understanding of what it looks like in our Nazarene church world. As a church denomination, we have what's called a multi-employer plan. So the Church of the Nazarene is the primary sponsor of our 403B plan, or all of our plans. And then we ask each of the Nazarene church entities across the U.S., that's churches, districts, et cetera, who want to participate in the plan to help co-sponsor it. And so there's paperwork that has to be filled out by every local church. And then we are the administrator of the plans. And one of the challenges that we have is there's not a common human resource department at any church, or very few churches. And so it makes it a challenge for us to communicate with you, our participants. So we'd ask that you, when we send stuff to you, we try not to send too much, but we try to make sure we send you only important things, that you pay attention to those so that you get all the information you need for our plans. We are funded through the Funding the Mission formula. We are at 2% of the total 10% that churches, districts are paying in to the General Treasurer's Office. And that is our lifeblood. Without those NBUSA funds, we would not be able to operate. So what do we do with the funds that you entrust to us for benefit purposes? These two charts that you see on the screen, the one on the left is the average from fiscal year 15 through 23. And the one on the right is our last completed fiscal operations year, fiscal year 24, September 30 of 24. And what you can notice right away, looking at just the colors, is that we used to put 63, nearly 2/3 of our budget into the old pension plans, the legacy pension plan, to make sure it was shored up for retirees. Now we're down to 44% in the pension plan, and we've doubled the amount of finances that we're able to apply towards the 403B plan. And that difference is what's making it possible for this new matching program that we're going to talk about today. A reminder that all of the benefits that we provide here at NBUSA are only supplemental in nature. None of the benefits we provide is everything you need. This is just something we consider a supplement that's not intended to replace your own efforts with life insurance, disability insurance, and any kind of retirement planning, but it's there is to be a part of it. How you qualify for our benefits is determined every January 1st. So we have a database that is synced up with the General Secretary's office. So we get all of our information and share data from them about all of you. And we look every January 1 at three important things. What is your current credential? And are you properly credentialed? Meaning, are you either district licensed or ordained? Are you in an appropriate ministerial role to receive our benefits? And that would be either a lead or senior pastor. Even if you're bivocational and part-time, as long as you're the lead or senior pastor, then you qualify. And then if you're in pastoral service, an associate pastor, you have to be full-time and full livelihood. And then the last thing we check on January 1st is we look at the very last church year to see if your local church has supported the NBUSA fund and at what level. And we check not just the past year, but we also look at the prior 5 years, and we compare the average of the prior 5 years with the last church year, and we give you the higher percentage. Because we know sometimes churches go through transitions, sometimes there's a year where it's a struggle. So we do that to make sure we find an excuse to give the higher percentage so you get the most benefit you can. So your status on January 1st remains your status for the rest of the calendar year. And so if you change to another church or you change roles, that will become effective for benefit purposes on January 1st of the following year. Let's talk about the importance of life insurance, what we now call survivor's benefits, because if you die, you don't benefit from it, your survivors do. It's really for the average church minister, the importance of it is an income replacement and then debt and expense coverage, retiring debt and helping with expenses. And the amount of insurance, the base amount of insurance that we provide to ministers is based on your age. If you're up to 50 years old, you get 30,000 of coverage. 51 to 70 is 15,000, and 71 to 75 is 7,500. And while you're in active service, your spouse is given $2,500 of coverage. The IRS says that life insurance proceeds to a beneficiary are not taxable income to them. So that's a good thing to remember. And you have the ability to purchase up to 500,000 of supplemental insurance, 125,000 for your spouse through the supplemental program. So we use our corporate and group buying power to try to get you good rates for additional life insurance that you can voluntarily purchase. And if you purchase insurance for your spouse, your dependent children will also be covered at 50% of that spouse level at no additional cost to a maximum of $20,000. There's a QR code on your screen that will provide you a link to our Nazarene Supplemental Insurance Guide. I'll go through a little bit of information from it here on these next few slides, but this is where you can get much more information and detailed information about the group term life, the individual long-term disability, and another accidental and death and dismemberment. It's a completely voluntary program. Looking at the life insurance, the survivor benefits, the supplemental, it looks at your age as of January 1st. And then as you can see, the older you get, the more expensive the cost becomes. There's an annual cost per $1,000 of coverage. You can buy it in increments of $10,000. And at the bottom of this screen, you'll see a box that shows $250,000 in coverage. And this is what it looks like if you bought $250,000 of coverage today. At age 30, it would cost you $20 a month. At age 40, it would cost you $36 a month. And at age 50 today, it would cost you a little over $100 a month. So you can see how the cost goes up as you get older. Another thing that happens with supplemental insurance is as you get older, there's additional limits placed on how much you can purchase. Once you hit 60 years of age, you'll see it's limited to $100,000. When you hit 65, it's limited to $30,000 and on down the line from there, and the costs actually go up. This insurance is provided by the Hartford through a contractual arrangement that we have with them. Other than life insurance, we provide long-term disability insurance. And the value of that is $500 per month should you become disabled. And that benefit will come to you until you reach your normal retirement age for Medicare purposes. There's no waiting period to be covered, but the payments will come to you 3 months after the disability occurs. So there's no short-term disability for those 3 months, but the long-term disability kicks in after the 3 months have passed. There are some pre-existing conditions that you need to check into if you have an interest in this, and there's additional coverage of up to $1,500 a month available for purchase. One of the changes we've made recently in this plan is if you are disabled and you do start receiving these benefits, you can claim them as housing allowance. So it's still subject to all the same housing allowance limitations and requirements as the housing allowance you normally claim, but now you can include these amounts and not pay income taxes on them. Like the life insurance, you can purchase additional supplemental long-term disability in increments of $500. You can see the amounts and the annual costs listed there. And again, just like the life insurance, the older you get, the more expensive it becomes. This is the table on the supplemental accidental death and dismemberment insurance. You can see that the coverage is up to $200,000 provided here. You can buy it for yourself as a primary and for dependents in the increments listed here and at these amounts, annual amounts. And like I said, if you have more interest in details on that, you could look up that supplemental brochure. We don't offer a health insurance plan to ministers in the U.S., a central health insurance plan that's regulated by each of the states and makes it very challenging to do a national plan for us. So we have partnered with our friends at Guidestone. Guidestone is the benefit arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, and they have a very robust health insurance program, a self-insured health insurance program that if you'll see here on the bottom, they offer faith-based medical coverage uniquely designed for your ministry. So they will write a health insurance plan to a single employee in a church, which single employee typically is the pastor, but they can write it down to as little as one person. And if you need health insurance, we would strongly suggest you look them up. You can see them on the website, www.guidestone.org/Nazarene. That's a web portion of their website that they've established specifically for our ministers, our participants. And if you already have a health insurance plan at your church, let me encourage you to ask them to quote your plan the next time it's up for renewal, which is typically towards the end of the year. So if nothing else, they can be a benchmark for you to compare the cost and the details of their proposed plan to what you already have. This is brand new information you probably are seeing for the first time from us, and that is that our partners at Fidelity, who is our record keeper for the 403B retirement savings plan, have also started a Medicare advisory service, and it's free of charge to those who participate in our plan. There's the website there at the bottom. If you want to find out more information, you can schedule a time to speak with an agent. You can evaluate their plan offerings online, but that's a valuable resource for those ministers who are approaching age 65, or at least want to start planning for that way, or maybe past 65 and ready to retire and be no longer in active service and need to check out the best options for them under Medicare. A few years ago, when we rebranded our name to Nazarene Benefits USA, we also adopted a vision statement. And that vision statement is that Nazarene ministers retire well. Now, retiring well is different for everyone. Everybody participating in this webinar today would probably describe it differently than the next person. But here's how we define retiring well. It doesn't necessarily mean rich. What it means is you get to retire with enough resources to live the lifestyle that you choose to. That's resources from a number of different places, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. You know, retirement readiness continues to be a significant issue for pastors, ministers in the Church of the Nazarenes. 2/3 of the ministers who are eligible to receive a match in our 403B match program do not get a match. They've paid their budgets, but they aren't putting money in retirement for us to match. And that's part of what we're trying to change going forward. One of the reasons we think that happens is people think it's too difficult to do, or it's confusing and they're not sure how to go about it, or they think it's too late for them. They should have done it years ago. And we understand all of those concerns, but it doesn't look like what this gentleman is staring at on the wall. It's actually very simple. We've created this new match program that started in January of 2024. We did it specifically to not be complicated, so that in hopes that ministers would easily join and easily see how it benefits them and shows the path to retire well. I mentioned 3 sources for retirement. The average Nazarene minister is going to need resources from these 3 areas. First is your active savings. That's the amount of money and assets that you collect outside of retirement funds over the course of your active life in ministry. And then the green section to the right is Nazarene benefits that come from your local church employer, how much they contribute to your retirement, as well as what NBUSA matches into your retirement account. And the third leg on this three-legged stool would be Social Security. And I've listed the Social Security website there for your convenience. If you have not recently checked your benefits with Social Security and what they're calculated to be and what the history of your contributions are, I would encourage you to do that, because the federal government is not perfect, just like the rest of us, and they can make mistakes. And you want to be sure that you're getting all of the credit for what you have already been taxed on under your self-employment tax. You know, as members of the clergy, you have some very unique tax advantages that I don't know of any other profession that gets this in the United States. And the first one is housing allowance, that you can shelter a significant portion of your income from federal income tax, and typically most state income tax, but you need to check with your own tax advisor about your particular state. So you don't pay income tax on the amount that you claim as housing allowance, but you'd still have to pay self-employment tax, your Social Security and Medicare as a self-employed minister. And then when you make contributions to the 403B plan of your money through payroll, the only way you can get your money into the 403B plan is through payroll, through your church. You don't pay income taxes on those monies. And this is the other part where you have an advantage over the average American, is that you also avoid paying Social Security and Medicare taxes on those contributions. Then while you're in active service, the funds that you've invested in your plan continue to generate investment return and cash flow. All of that accumulates tax deferred. No taxes are paid on that until it's withdrawn. That's like everybody else in the country. And then here's the other third advantage that you have as a member of the clergy, is that when you begin to take distributions from your plan, you have the ability to claim them as housing allowance in retirement. And so you can avoid paying income taxes when you make distributions as well. So to recap what I just said, if you plan properly, you can put money in, you can have the money grow, and you can take money out of your 403B, Nazarene 403B account, and never pay any income taxes on it. Now, in retirement, you get to claim it as housing allowance, but it's still, those distributions are still subject to the normal IRS requires substantiation and limits. So when you retire and you begin to take money distributions out of your 403B account, you'll get a 1099 after the end of every year from Fidelity, and it'll have in the box 1 where it talks about how much money you received the prior year. There'll be a box check that says the taxable amount has not been determined. That's because we have told Fidelity that you're a credentialed minister, a member of the clergy. So Fidelity is saying, well, then we're going to say we don't know if this is taxable and tell the IRS. They have to look to you and how you report it on your tax return to determine what, if any, of that amount is taxable. So what that means for you as a retired minister is you got to make sure you keep good records, and you keep those records permanently in your file that substantiates what you're doing. The other big difference when you're in retirement, right now you're used to going to your board every year saying, here's the amount of housing allowance I want to claim. Your board approves that. And that's a permanent and important record today, because today when you're in active service, the IRS says your board has to approve those things. When you're in retirement, there is no more board. You don't have to go to the district. You don't have to go to our office. There's no more approval of the allowance amount, but you're still limited that your housing costs that you claim for housing allowance, they cannot exceed the fair market lease value of the home or its furnishings. One of the questions we often get is, well, what if my house is paid for? I don't have a mortgage payment anymore. I don't have very much to claim. Well, you still have your utilities, you still have your taxes, you still have your insurance. If you have maintenance on the house, you fix up something, all of that is allowable housing allowance, subject to the lease value limitation. Another question we get asked often is, well, how much should I save for retirement? What's the right number for me? Well, it's different for everybody depending on what kind of income you have. But Fidelity has put together this wonderful graphic that really mirrors what any financial advisor would tell you. And that is, you need to look at setting a goal for a certain multiple of your gross income, your gross salary, not net of housing allowance or anything else, your gross salary, some multiple of that at different ages. So if you look at this chart right in the middle, if you're age 45, you should have 4 times the amount of your current annual gross salary in retirement. And you can see that multiple continues to grow until you get to age 67, normal retirement age this time of year, this for this stage of life. And you should have 10 times your salary. Now, I know most ministers are looking at this chart going, Kevin, you're crazy. There's no way I could do that. And I hear that. But I would challenge you that you need to do something. If these multiples don't work in your planning, then you need to develop multiples that do work in your planning and your situation, and then you can gauge your progress. It's not something you have to look at every month, every quarter, but probably at least once a year to gauge your progress and are you progressing towards that goal? The other question we get is how should you save for retirement? Most financial planners will tell you that you should save 15% of your annual gross income every year in your retirement account. You should start doing that by no later than age 25. Now, when we say 15% of your annual gross income, that's not just your money. That's what you put in retirement, what your local church puts in to either match or help contribute to your retirement, and then what NBUSA puts in with our matching contribution. That's the 15% number you need to shoot for. And while you're in active service and ministry, you should keep more than 50% of your investments in some form of stock fund so that you can have the higher return with it. On average, the stocks earn better, over the long haul. And if you don't have a substantial portion invested in stocks, you're not going to reach the goals you need. And when you're younger, you have more tolerance for risk. You have more runway ahead of you. So if you do have a down market, which do come from time to time, and I'll show you a chart that shows that in recent years, you have opportunity to still be serving and make up that difference. Number 3, you should plan to retire at 67. That's normal retirement age. Maybe you want to work longer, but that is the normal retirement age today for full Social Security benefits. But you should plan to live to age 93. In fact, Fidelity is telling their young clients that they should plan to live to age 100. And the reason you do that is you don't want to plan to the average lifespan, which was somewhere in the low to mid 80s, and then run out of assets. So you should plan to live longer in terms of financial planning. Number 4, you want to plan to maintain your same lifestyle that you do today, and probably should, and figure out if there's some part of your lifestyle that's going to change that you need to make adjustments for. Is your house going to be paid for by then? Well, then you don't need to be paying a mortgage. Or maybe, one of the things that happens to all of us is healthcare costs go up when we're in retirement, when we get older. So you want to think about those things and make sure you're identifying the significant items in your lifestyle that would change from what you're doing today. And then the 5th item on how you should save for retirement is to review your plan at least annually and then make adjustments as necessary. There's different ways that you can manage your money within our 403B plan. The first way is you can self-manage it. You feel like you know enough information to evaluate the 27 different funds that are in our plan, and you can pick and choose from them as you wish and manage it yourself, and that's perfectly acceptable. The second way is through a single fund, and you'll notice about a dozen or so of our plans, of our funds in the plan are called target date funds. Target date funds allow you to pick a fund that's somewhere close to the year you plan to retire. They're out there in 5-year increments. I'll show a chart on that in a second. You can invest all of your money into that fund. They are professionally managed. Each of those target date funds are professionally managed. So there's more risk in them the younger you are. And then as you get closer to that retirement date, they become to get more conservative, shifting more over to income and safer investments. So the return on those funds starts to get a little bit lower as you get older. And then number 3 is a managed account. And that's where you can hire Fidelity to manage your accounts for you for a fee, or you can hire your own certified financial planner outside of the Fidelity arrangement, outside of the 403B, and they can help you with managing your assets. All of those folks typically work based on a percentage of the value of your assets. So keep that in mind. Here's a listing. I did this about a year ago of all the target date funds that are in our 403B plan. And you can see they go out to 2065 now. I think we've added a 2070 fund since this was done. And they go down to as little as 2010. There's an index fund here that is where when these funds out here expire, your money gets transferred into this index fund so it doesn't get lost. But you can see that out in these funds that go out 20, 60, 65, 55, this is all stocks right here, domestic and non-domestic, US and non-US. And it's all vested in stocks, 90% in stocks until you get out to this 2040 year. And those funds then begin to go down in stocks and more in fixed income. So that's how the target date funds work. You don't have to go in and do once a year, adjust anything. This is all being professionally managed, and these risks are being shifted around as you age. This is the latest fee structure for Fidelity. If you chose to ask them to manage your account for you, they have an annual gross fee here that's if you have 100,000 or less, which most of our ministers would probably fall in that category. It's 0.71%. They have a range that they like to try to hit, and then there's an average that they try to target. So if you kind of look at that average, that's probably where you're going to fall if you chose to pay them to manage your funds. Now, don't be confused. If you call Fidelity and you ask them for help, they're still going to talk to you. That's part of the service, the arrangement that we have with them as our record keeper. They have lots of advice they can give you, but they will not get into the nitty-gritty details of personally managing your assets without a fee arrangement. Let's look at some additional information about our retirement savings plan. It's a contribution plan. It's called in the technical terms a defined contribution plan. It's not like the old legacy pension plan, which is a defined benefit plan. So in a defined contribution plan, you get out of the plan whatever you put into it. That's why it's called a contribution plan. Today, our plan value is at over 850 million. I think I checked it the other day. It was over 870 million in value. We have over 13,000 accounts that are fairly equally divided between retirees or inactives and those who are still actively serving. Contributions get into your account in the plan from you, the local minister, through your payroll withholding, and then from your local church through any contributions or matching that your local church wants to do. And we call under this new matching program, we call that local effort. And that's the largest distinction between this new program and the old APS program is the old APS program didn't require local effort. This new program does. And then NBUSA, we come in and we match the total amount of that local effort by some percentage. And then we'll go through those details in just a minute. If you're not aware, there is an investment committee of the general church that oversees all of the investments of the church, including the assets that we have management over. So they look at these 403B mutual funds. They evaluate how they perform. They evaluate the cost and expense. They evaluate how they're performing to peers. Occasionally, we'll make a change. I serve on that committee as well as the general treasurer of the church. And when I joined that several years ago, one of the things I was impressed with is the committee has an independent financial advisor who is there to advise the committee and doesn't get paid based on performance. They get paid a flat fee to be an advisor, and they don't have skin in the game about whether or not they get more if they make more. And I think that's a very wonderful thing. And here at NBUSA, we also have a board of directors. This is our current board. And what we have is one representative from each of the 8 fields in the U.S. We have one member at large, and then we have 2 members who are in position by virtue of their office. Dr. Gustavo Crocker is the jurisdictional GS for the next 2 years, so he's now a member of our board. And Mr. Keith Cox, our general treasurer, is a permanent member of our board. Ms. Jill Rice, an attorney, is our chairperson, and our bylaws require that at least 4 of our members be members of the clergy, but I could say it's about half and half on our board. We have a good mix of clergy and lay representatives, and they're a wonderful board. Additional information about our plan, we use Fidelity Investments as our record keeper and have for over 20 years. They provide planning tools and advisory services for you that are free of charge. They have local branch office support. If you have a local branch office, you can utilize those folks to help you as well. And they have a diverse array of mutual funds that they help us with in the plan. A couple of years ago, we added a Roth component to the plan. And what's interesting about that is I just talked about housing allowance and how you can put your money in, take your money out without paying income tax. So you might wonder, Kevin, why does a minister need a Roth component inside the 403B plan? And the reason for that is when you graduate to heaven, your housing allowance ends. Your spouse does not inherit it, your kids don't inherit it. So if you had some portion of your retirement into a Roth component inside the plan, then those assets would transfer to your beneficiaries, and they can take them out on an after-tax basis. Another thing we did a few years ago was we added a brokerage link option. From time to time, we have participants contact us saying they want more mutual fund choices. One of the things you have in a corporate group 403B plan like this is you don't want too many choices, nor do you want too little. So we think 27 is about the right mix in terms of fund choices, but some people need more. So they can shift a portion of your 403B assets to this brokerage link option. And that opens up the universe of mutual and index funds to you. You can also buy individual CDs and treasuries, but there's a catch to it. And one of those things is you can't buy individual securities. You can't do any option agreements. You can't do any of that funky stuff that you can't do in a qualified plan. But you're also going to pay retail fees and fund costs inside those. Those are strictly retail products that are being accessed by our plan. So there's no benefit of the oversight and the management, the lower cost structure that we have in the 27 funds that have been pre-selected. So you want to make sure you think about that before you go that direction, but it is there available to you. I mentioned earlier about the markets and how they go up and down. And this is a chart. If you look at the green bars across there, this is the value of the assets in the 403B plan at the end of each of our fiscal years, which is in September 30th. So you can see it was just over 400 million in 2015, and now it's up to 800 million. And I know it's higher than that today at the end of September of 24. That the orange line going across there is the return on investment. That's the earnings that the assets in the plan have accumulated every year going through there. And you'll see the trend line is on an upward slope, and it's somewhere right around that 10% area. And over the course of time, that's what you'll see in our plan. Even though like 22 was a really bad year for everyone, both in the fixed income market and the stock market, it bounced straight back up in 23 and even higher in 24. So on average, you can count on about 10%. And you'll see when we talk about planning for your retirement, we encourage you to use a 7% long-term rate because it's a conservative number that you'll probably beat. The Church of the Nazarene Manual says that under the calling of a pastor, that providing the agreed upon remuneration in full shall be considered a moral obligation by the church. And then it goes further under the local church board to say, and to determine the amount of remuneration and benefits, and that includes retirement benefits that the pastor shall receive, and to review them at least once a year. Those highlights in those manual quotes are mine. And then we've also added this box at the bottom that says paying your NBUSA fund obligation is only part of that retirement benefit obligation. Your church pays in the NBUSA fund does not go directly to your own retirement account. It gets used for the benefit of all. So it's important that the church support you in retirement besides just paying the NBUSA fund budget. So a couple of years ago, we were trying to answer the question of how do we address the significant lack of retirement readiness among our ministers? And we came to the conclusion that it's going to require more local effort on the part of ministers and churches, but it's also going to require us to do more financially as well. And prior to a few years ago, we were not in a position where we could do that, and now we are. So this is the table for the local church ministers match. If you haven't seen this, it has not changed since we started the program. So and I'm going to walk through an example of how this is calculated for a church minister, or how it could be calculated for a local church minister. If you're a leader, a senior pastor, or a bivocational leader, senior pastor, or a full-time, full livelihood associate, then these benefits are for you. So in this example, we have a church who has paid 100% of its NBUSA fund budget. And remember, that's either the last completed church year. When we look at January 1, we look back at the last completed church year, or the average of the prior 5 years. And if one of those is 100%, then we'll use the 100% number. So NBUSA will match 50% of whatever local effort is done by the minister in the local church, up to $2,500 total out of our fund. So in this example, the church has paid 100%. The local church minister has put in $2,400 of their own funds. The church has come alongside the minister and said, hey, pastor, we're going to match 50 cents on the dollar, whatever you put in. So they've put in $1,200 in this year. And this is an interesting thing. This minister also has some student debt that he or she is paying. So they've paid $1,400 in student debt payments. About 6 months after we started this new match program, we took advantage of some changes in the tax law that allows employers to match student debt payment dollars into an employee's 403B account or retirement account. So if you have student debt, you can register those loans with Fidelity. We have a portal through Fidelity to do that. They've engaged a third party to track those loans. And then once a year, they report back to us how much student debt payments you've made. When we say payments, that's principal and interests, not just principal. And then we can match against those into your retirement account. So these numbers, and this adds up to $5,000 in what we call local effort. Those numbers add up to $5,000. So if NBUSA said, well, church, you paid 100% of your budget to us, so we're going to match 50% of that local effort, and we're going to add $2,500 to this minister's account. So all of those yellow shaded numbers add up to $6,100 that have gone into this minister's account in this example. Let's look at some results from the match program that we have through the June 30th. So we've got 18 months experience under our belt now. So let's begin by looking at the universe of credentialed ministers in the U.S. Here they are. We have about 8,000 credentialed ministers. The LCMs is local church ministers, but only about 69% of them are eligible for our benefits. And you can see that's consistent between 24 and so far 6 months into 25. So let's look at who received a match in 2024. There were over almost 1,900 eligible ministers who got a match, but you can see 2/3 did not get a match. And those numbers don't look very different than you see here so far in 2025 through the first 2 quarters. This is the progress we've made in terms of number of ministers that we've added to the match bucket since the beginning. We started in 2004 in Q1. Now, under the old APS program, there were 1,200 ministers who got some type of a match from us. And now we've added the first quarter of 24, we added 317 to that number until now we're out here in June of 2025. The total accumulated participants that we've added because they've gotten active locally and putting money in their 403B account is 885. That's a 73% increase over 18 months. And we're pretty proud of that number, but we need to keep it going. Digging a little deeper, these are the numbers of ministers who had contribution activity in their account. Where you see EE, that's employee. So that's the local minister. And you can see between 24 and so far in 25, it's right about the same, 1,500 made contributions to their account. And this ER is employer. So this is the local church. Again, between 1,100 and 1,200 or so. That's been fairly consistent year over year. And then this is how many that we matched. We saw that in an earlier chart between 18 and 1,900 over the 2 years. And we still have 6 months to go this year. So total, there's nearly 2,000 ministers who had some form of contribution to their account over 24 and 25. Let's look at the total dollars that we are contributing from NBUSA and from the local level. Local church ministers have put out a total of 6.9 million last year into their retirement accounts. And what's interesting about this chart is the orange is last year, 24, the blue is 25, and you'll see we're more than halfway up each of the 24 columns. Whoops, let me go back to that. So if this represents 6 months, if we double that, that's going to put it about 7.4 million, which is going to be above this. If we double this, it's going to be over 4 million. That's above that. So it looks like we're on pace to total dollars contributed to the 403B plan to be at an increase from 24 with 6 months to go this year. Here's the average amount that went into a minister's account from themselves. You can see it's $4,749 for all of 2024. And so far this year, it's just over 2,500. So local church ministers who are contributing to their own account on average are going to be somewhere over $5,000 each if these trends keep going. Local church employers have contributed about $3,000 for all of last year towards their pastor's account. And so far they're at $1,800. Again, if we double that, they'll be at $3,600. And here's what NBUSA provided on average. Again, this is only 2 quarters. We have 2 more quarters to go, so we will exceed this number for certain. So last year in 2024, the average minister had over $7,000 contributed to their retirement account from these three sources. And so far this year through June, we're at 4,190. So if this trend continues and we double this number, it'll be up over 8,000 on average per minister. So what does that 7,000 from 2024 look like if it's done every year and it's broken up into quarterly installments? Well, here's what it does. These are round numbers, but assuming that they're going to earn a 7% long-term investment rate, if you did the $7,000 for 5 years, you'd have $40,000 in your retirement account. If you did it for 20 years, you would have about $300,000 in your retirement account. Remember, this is at 7% earnings. If you could do better than that, you'll have more. If you did it for 40 years, if you were young and you had that kind of time in front of you, you would have over $1.5 million in your retirement account after 40 years. When we first started this program, we were getting lots of questions from especially small church pastors, understandably from small church pastors who basically said, Kevin, we can't afford to do this. We don't have two nickels to rub together. I can't afford it personally. My church can't afford it. So we can't be a part of this. And so I challenge you all that think that or feel that way with this question. What other opportunities do you have to earn a 61% return on your money? And let me explain what I mean by that. I'm going to show you how if you invest a little over $1,200, that's about $100 a month, you will get $750 in return. And here's how that math works. As a minister, if you contribute $1,500 of your money through payroll deduction, that's $125 a month, you get a tax break from that because you are able to shelter some things, reduce your taxes. So it's only going to cost you $1,240. But you're going to end up with $2,250 in your account because we're going to add $750 match to that $1,500, assuming your church has paid 100% of its connectional budget to us. So you're going to cost you $1,240, you're going to end up with $2,250. If you did that for 40 years, you'd be at almost $500,000 in your retirement account just at 7%. So it is affordable. It is doable in smaller numbers. And I would encourage you to talk to us about how you can get started if you've not already. You'll notice in that example that I just showed that there is nothing about the local church helping that pastor. Just think what those numbers would look like if the local church came alongside the pastor and said, Pastor, let us help you. We're going to match dollar for dollar, or we're going to match 50% of what you're doing, or we're going to make periodic one-time contributions. I spoke to a pastor several months back who had his church. He hadn't received a raise in 5 years. He hadn't received anything in his retirement account from his church. And he had a great meeting with his board to discuss this new 403B match plan. And his church gave him a 5% raise, 1% for each of the years that he hadn't gotten one. And then they said they were going to take a love offering at Christmas time at the end of the year, and all the money is going to go into his retirement account. And he was already putting his own money in. So it makes those numbers exponentially better when the local church comes alongside. How does the local church do that? I just mentioned they can do discretionary amounts. They can do their own level of employer match. You don't have to adopt some grand plan. You can just make a policy, just make a decision as a board. We're going to do X amount for our pastor, or we're going to do X% in matching, whatever. It's really, the sky is the limit in terms of the ways you can get creative in doing this. One of the great things about this new match program is that we are adding the NBUSA match to your 403B account every quarter. So every calendar quarter closes. The next month, we do all of the analysis, we get the reports, and we figure out who's eligible and how much. And then we make those contributions before the end of the next month. I mentioned the student loans earlier. One of the limitations on the student loan program is we can only match those dollars one time per year because we have to look at the annual collections. There's not a real-time quarterly number we can go work on. So those come in the second quarter of every year. So as you see this information that I've shared, and I know I've gone through it quickly, I would just ask you, what's your plan? You know, the most important step that you take with respect to your retirement is the very next step. If you haven't done what you've needed to do, I would encourage you to start small, but commit to making annual increases because you won't feel the difference. I encourage you to talk with your church treasurer or your board about your situation and how they can help you. I'm a longtime church board member, and it would pain me if I knew my pastor was struggling with something like this and we could help. If you're bivocational, you need to consider everything. What kind of benefits are you getting from your other vocation versus what's available in these benefits, and maximize whichever one or both works for you. And if you haven't been doing what you should, if you just delayed and procrastinated, forget the past because you can't change it, and just focus what you can do on your future. And lastly, we would ask that you please don't wait and that you act on what it is you hear. So here's how you can maximize your NBUSA benefits. Maintain your credential and your eligible role. Make sure that your local church's NBUSA fund budget gets paid at 100%. That has an impact. Paying into the NBUSA fund is how you get basic life and disability insurance first, but it also determines the percentage of match of local effort that you can get into your retirement account. Make sure there are local effort contributions that you're contributing to your own account, and challenge your church to help you. If you have student loans, please be sure and go online and register them if they apply to you so we can begin tracking those. And then that's free money. You're going to make the payments anyway. Why not allow us to match the dollars and put it in your retirement account? Evaluate your need for additional insurance. Check your earnings history at ssa.gov. And then lastly, evaluate your plan and your status at least one time per year. An adequate retirement is all about time and money. It's a very foundational axiom. The more that you have of one, the less you're going to need of the other. We often get asked what the limits are on 403B contributions. It's typically not an issue for the average Nazarene minister, but here's the numbers. There's an annual limit for you as an employee that has a catch-up provision if you're age 50 or over. And there's also an aggregate limit between your contributions and those of your employer and what NBUSA would add. And if there's been a change in recent law that if you turn age 60, 61, 62, or 63 during this year, there are some even incremental higher limits that you can check, and call us if you need information on those details. There's a very strange and quirky provision in the tax code that says for ministers with no cash compensation, there's still an ability for the church to help with their retirement. So typically you have to have earned wages to have anything go into a retirement account. But this provision, again, applies only to clergy and allows the church to put up to $10,000 per year directly into a retirement account with a maximum of $40,000 lifetime for that minister. So the church is limited to $10,000 per year, and the minister is limited to only $40,000 over their lifetime. So it's not a lot in the big picture, but it is something, and it really would work well for those pastors who maybe are volunteering and just getting housing as part of their compensation. So if you need information on that, let us know. Lots of ways to connect with Fidelity. You can chat with a representative online between 8:30 and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. You can meet one-on-one with them. You can use your local office. There's a dedicated phone line there at the bottom of the screen, 866 Nazarene. That takes you directly to a division of Fidelity that deals with what they call the tax-exempt market. That's church plans like ours, municipal plans like school districts and states and those kind of things. So they're specialists in these type of plans. You can contact our office. We're open from 8 to 4:30, Monday through Friday Central Time. We have an 888 number, benefits@nazarene.org, and of course our website. We strongly urge you to consult with your own financial advisor. We are not licensed financial advisors. We cannot give you specific advice, but we can give you lots of great information and help you on your planning. If you've not been to our website lately, you go there and you click on the Your Role tab that's circled there in red, and this drop-down menu comes out. And if you're a local church ministry, you click there. If you're a lay employee, church treasurer, district office, you click on any one of those that applies to you, and it takes you to a section of our website where there's information that's bundled specifically to your ministry role. If you come over to the other side and click on the benefit login button, that takes you to My NBUSA, which is our own NBUSA portal for participants that allows you to see certain details of your retirement and insurance plan information. You can change beneficiaries, you can request changes. All of that detail is out there for you to look at 24/7 through that portal. If you're not familiar with the Compass Initiative, I would encourage you to visit their website. They have been handing out grant monies through a financial education program. I know that's going to be coming to an end before too long here, but we are actually in discussions with the Compass Initiative about partnering going forward in other ways that we can help ministers retire well and to live purposeful lives. And so look for more information on that in the future. We also offer some free resources that come from the ECFA. That's the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. Wonderful Christian organization based on the East Coast. They offer a minister's tax and financial guide and a church and nonprofit tax and financial guide free of charge. We make those available through our website. You can use the QR code on the screen, and they update those every year. They're very I use those resources all the time. I'm going to end this presentation with the demonstration of the retirement planning tool that we've developed. It asks a minister to answer 9 simple questions, and then it identify the potential value of your 403b retirement plan into the future when you want to retire and beyond. It also helps to quantify the high cost of waiting. If you don't move now on it, how much more it's going to cost you. I'm going to go through an example here that we have prepared just to illustrate how it works. It is not a formal financial plan. It cannot be used as a formal financial plan, but it's certainly a gauge. It's certainly a guide that can help anyone. And if you're interested in having us walk through this with you, you can just let our office know. We'll walk through it with you. We'll actually send you the Excel file. It's an Excel spreadsheet file with your results, and you can play with it on your own. So let's walk through the first 5 of these 9 questions. This is a minister who is age 35. And what happens in this tool is you fill out the boxes on the right in the yellow, and then it populates all of the results. Line number 2 says, at what age do you plan to retire? This minister says, my full retirement age for Social Security is 67, so that's when I'm going to retire. The next question is, what kind of rate of return on your funds do you plan to have while you are in active service? And this minister wants to earn 7%, which is pretty normal. The next question is, how much is in your current Nazarene 403b account? This 35-year-old minister has managed to save $10,000 in the retirement account. And this is the hardest question of the whole 9 questions. Well, how much do you want to be in that account when you reach age 67? And this minister has said, well, I want $500,000 in that account. So that's first 5 questions. The next question, your expected age at death for planning purposes. I told you previously, plan to 93, even though life expectancy is lower than that today. You should plan to 93, and this minister is going to do that. The next question is, what kind of annual rate of return do you want to earn on your investments once you retire? Because again, you get less risky, you get more conservative when you're in retirement, so you can't make the same level of earnings. 5% is a pretty typical number. You can play around with 4, you can play around with 6, whatever your risk tolerance is, you can put different numbers in there. So then when you reach age 67 in this example, and you want to start taking down that $500,000 you've got saved up, at what rate are you going to take it out? Most financial planners would say a 5% withdrawal rate is typical. So 5% of that 500,000 will get divided up into 12 monthly installments the first year, and those will come out. Then the last question is an important one. What kind of inflation factor should we talk about in doing this planning? Healthcare costs go up. Inflation isn't going to stop just because you retired. So we'll use a 3% inflation rate. So what will happen is after year 1 and you taking 5% of your value out, in year 2, you're going to take 3% more, not 8%, 3% of the 5. So that you're getting your inflation factor covered every year going forward. And so here's what those 9 questions, those 9 pieces of input look like in summary form. So this minister, who's age 35, has 32 more years ahead of them to be in active service and actively saving for retirement. That $10,000 that they have already saved is going to grow by itself to $93,000. Remember, he and she wants to get to 500,000. So they've got to figure out how to come up with $400,000 difference to plug that gap. Well, this does the math for you. So that means monthly, they need to add $283 to their retirement account monthly for the next 32 years. If they do that and they earn 7%, they will make this $500,000 goal. So at retirement, when they say, okay, I made my $500,000, saved it up, now I want 5%, that's $2,000 a month right here. By the time they're 93, that will have grown at 3% a year to $4,300, so that over the course of their 26 years in retirement, they will average a little more than $3,000 a month coming out of this plan, and they'll still have about $15,000 left over. So remember, I said they had to fill a $400,000 gap to get to that $500,000. And here's what that looks like. It's $238 a month, $3,400 a year, but it only adds up to $108,000 in total because it has 32 years to earn as it keeps getting added. That's why it doesn't take 400,000 to make it happen. It only takes 100,000. But if they wait, let's say this minister says, this is great, but I'm not ready. And they wait 5 years, so they only have 27 left. Now it's going to cost them 49% more to get that $500,000. If they wait 10 years, it's going to cost them 129% more. So you can see how it adds up. Here's how it might look for this minister. They want to do 3,400 a year. Well, the local minister does 1,500. The local church matches 50%, and NBUSA comes in and matches 50% of those numbers. That's how it might look. Very typical example. And then remember, I just showed you the average minister currently participating in the plan is seeing $7,000 a year added to their account. One last piece of announcement before we open it up for questions. We have a new change coming to the match program effective January 1. I mentioned that a lot of small church ministers are struggling to become a part of this. We're going to change the match, add a component to it so that the first $250 of local effort is going to get matched by NBUSA dollar for dollar. So if you put in 250, we're going to match it with 250. The only requirement, other than being eligible to do this, is that your local church has to have paid at least 50% of its NBUSA fund budget. So if you can make that happen, it's a quick way to get $500 into your retirement account in a hurry by only costing you $250. The rest of the contributions will be subject to the match table that I showed you earlier and the related maximums. And so that's a lot of information over the last hour. So Emily, I don't know if you have a series of questions, but we're going to open the floor for questions right now.
Yeah, Kevin, and thank you. Yeah, there are a few questions here. So I'll just walk through these. One question here is about the student loan payments. Do those count as part of, they said 5,250 allowable amount for employers? We might want to clarify, the maximum versus what's allowed, and then also how the student loan payments factor into the total match.
Yeah, so let me go back to the table. Here we go. So remember I showed a table a minute ago that had like $30,000 or something like that as the annual limit that you could put in retirement. That's usually not anywhere close to an issue for a minister. So your student debt and any cash that you or your church put in your 403B, the total of all those is what counts as local effort. That's why I show this table here. The 2,400 of going into the account, the 1,200 the church put in, plus the 1,400, that's 5,000 of local effort. So we'll match 50% of this number if the church has paid 100% of its budget to us. But you can put 6,000 in, you can put 7,000, you can put 10,000 in these numbers, but we're still only going to maximum that we'll put in is $2,500. So I hope that clarifies that.
Yes, and if it doesn't, whoever asked that question, feel free to type back in and we can talk about it some more. There's a couple other questions here. How do we go about getting the NBUSA contribution for our pastor? We pay our church portion and contribute for our pastor too. So I think they're just talking about how do they get the match?
Why don't you answer that one, Emily?
Well, we're tracking it. So we may have already done it, and your pastor should take a look at their account. But basically, we just have to know who your pastor is. So if we have their information, which we should, and you're making contributions on their behalf, then we will match that on a quarterly basis, and then up to that maximum for the year.
So what's the mechanics of how that happens, Emily?
Oh, we have a report from
No,
Fidelity.
in terms of the signing up, I mean.
Oh, to signing up. Oh, well, that's the next question. Someone asked, what paperwork do I need to do? That's a contribution agreement form is what we need for that. And that is found on our website. It's a document that the pastor and the church treasurer complete together. So the pastor completes the first section, and then the treasurer reviews and signs off. The pastor determines how much they want to contribute from their own perspective, and then the treasurer will indicate what kind of match or additional contribution can be made. And then they return that to us, and we provide instructions on making those contributions through an online portal called the Simplified Contribution Platform. It's all online and managed with our partnership with Fidelity.
And how long does it typically take for all that to happen?
You want to plan ahead because with the platform that we use, there is some banking validation and things like that. So from start to finish, you could expect a couple weeks to pass, just to get all of the different validation in place and things set up and coding.
So you'll see on your screen, there's a QR code as well as the web address to take you to a portion of our website. When we do one of these presentations, we record it and we keep updating them out there so the latest information is available. So you can go there and you can rewatch this webinar. There's lots of printed materials that you can print off or download to your own computer that talk about all these details, including that form that Emily was talking about.
Absolutely. So the next question here, this person feels like they got a lot of information, which there was a lot of information. So their question is, what are my first steps as a licensed minister with no retirement account whatsoever? What do I do first?
Well, the first steps are getting that form filled out so you can get started. And I would encourage you to contact our office. Let us walk through that template that I just showed, gave the example of that planning template. So it's important to know where you stand versus where you want to go and what's it going to take to get there. And if you're late in saving for retirement, that can be very discouraging to think about. But you still need to know where you are because everything that you can do between now and then will just minimize the impacts of not being retirement ready. And then your only choices, I mean, if you don't plan and don't take some steps, your choices are to continue working well beyond the years that you want to. But the reality of that, folks, is you may not be physically able to work beyond the years that you're thinking. So that may not be an option for you. Then you may need assistance from your kids or your family in retirement, and so you're going to do what you can to take care of yourself. Social Security is never going to be enough for any one person. It's just going to be a supplement like ours is a supplement. So it takes those three things together, your savings, your local church, us, and Social Security.
Thanks, Kevin. I think we got another question here. I think this might be related to that first student debt question. Oh, the church is helping the pastor pay some of their student debt. So is that separate from whatever they have set up there? Is that separate from the student debt type match that we're doing on our side?
Oh, I see. So the church is helping pay some of the student debt.
That's what it sounds like.
Well,
Yes.
if they're, you might want to call our office so we can get it or reach out to us by email so we can define exactly what that is. But I forgot to clarify this about the student loans is those are for your loans, not your kids' loans, not your spouse's loan, only your loans. It doesn't have to be for ministry. It doesn't have to be for a seminary degree or anything like that. As long as it's your loan in your name, it does not include student loan forgiveness. So if you're in a forgiveness program, those aren't payments. Those are forgiveness. We only match actual payments on the loan. Now, if your church is helping to make payments for you, we probably need to look at that situation. And my guess is yes, that would count, but I don't think we've encountered that, Emily, that I'm aware of. But we could certainly, again, we try to find reasons to make it happen for you, not reasons not to do it. So give us a contact and we'll look at it in more detail.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would add, yeah, like we're not helping people pay on their student debt, but we are taking what they are paying to match against to put into the retirement account.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
benefit that you are doing as your church for the pastor, it feels like it can partner still with what we're doing because we're focusing on retirement and we just don't want student debt to be a barrier to saving for retirement also. This
These are great
person,
questions.
yeah, right. Um, This question here says, I'm bivocational in transition now. Can I move my funds to the 403b?
Yes, absolutely. And I would encourage you to do that because we have a relatively low cost structure in the plan. And I think you'll do better than anywhere else. So yes, once you're in the plan, you can what they call oh, what's the term, Emily? I lost the term. Rollover.
A
You
rollover.
can roll over from another qualified plan into our plan. And Fidelity has actually a very seamless way to do that. And it actually happens very quickly.
There you go. This question here is about having this presentation available for Spanish speaking pastors.
Oh, yes. Why don't you take that, Emily?
Yeah, we do. We have this presentation available in Spanish. We have a fabulous representative here in our office who is fluent in Spanish and loves doing presentations to our Spanish speakers. And so we are happy to do, district level or, whatever type of groups together, presentations in Spanish. So if that's something that is of interest or be helpful, definitely reach out.
Well, I see it's 5 after the hour. Are there additional questions? We can stay as long
I
as you want to stay asking questions.
I do not see any questions. I'm not sure if people have the ability to raise their hand or anything.
Okay.
I think you do. So if anyone's typing a question, maybe push the button to raise your hand.
So while they may be typing a little bit more, Emily, why don't you tell us about the our Nazarene Virtual Benefits Fair that's coming up in November?
Yeah, November 20th. We're having our second annual Nazarene Benefits Fair. So this will be a bit of a longer session for a bit more comprehensive information. So we'll be sharing information about the benefits that we provide here, but we're also bringing in our partners from Fidelity. There's going to be a workshop on cybersecurity and making sure that your information is secure and how we can help support that, and also just good practice for you to have. There's going to be a workshop on healthcare and retirement, Medicare, and then one on Social Security, how to claim that in retirement, and how that fits within your overall retirement plan. We also have some tax professionals who will be having a session on minister's taxes, especially around the housing allowance and things to keep in mind that are unique to your situation. So that registration information will be shared by email probably in the next few weeks. You can watch for that. We'll be posting it to our website as well, or you can always reach out to us and we can share that with you. But that's November 20th. It's Thursday of that week, and I believe it's from 2 to 5 p.m. Central.
And Emily, it just struck me that we didn't see anything about continuing education credit in this presentation, but we do have it, do we not?
We sure do. We will share that in the follow-up email.
Okay. And there will
We can do
be
that.
credit for that virtual benefits fair as well in November.
Yes.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the interest in securing your future in retirement. Please reach out to us. We're here to serve you, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless you all. Bye-bye.